Maine has always provided a refuge when I find myself facing uncertain times. Forests and swamps give a timeless respite from a world of rapid change, while getting lost on old country roads can give space to contemplate solutions for a new direction. I like to get lost on these roads till I find my way back to familiar highways, stopping at old village cemeteries dotted along the way. Some are nearly overgrown, while others make room for new tenants alongside older graves. Some of these stones are faded and withered, cracked or fallen, being reclaimed by moss or colonies of ants. I feel witness to a primitive reincarnation, old spirits calling forth a song whose words have been forgotten. I recognize old families that gave their namesake to local roads and streams, or carried on in the gleaming eyes of the peers of my youth. Tattered threads of history trace their roots to these dull inscriptions, inviting someone to try and weave together that unbroken mystery, as new families are created out of a cradle endlessly rocking. I see the original settlers of my town, driven by a spiritual vision they wouldn't see realized as death came easy and often. Child mortality was high, as throughout the history of our species, and some graves are simply marked baby or children, perhaps hiding the crushing sadness that must have been felt behind general anonymity. Others must have tried to preserve a sense of dignity with proper names and dates, but certainly they were no less sad. Disease and famine drove these people into this unknown territory and would strike down those even in the prime of their lives. What deep emotion is hidden behind these inscriptions? Can words in stone turn living again as questions sprung forth from my consciousness? Did Captain Blanchard die a year after his last child out of grief? Did Mrs. Blanchard carry that sorrow, outliving them all? Did George and Eliza Carter accept a life without children easily after their own 3 children died before 10 months of age? What was it like for Mr. Russell to outlive his wife and 2 sons, all taken within 1 year of each other by the war and perhaps a mother's broken heart? Clues of these forgotten tragedies and triumphs of endurance in a landscape of uncertainty. What deep emotion is hidden behind these inscriptions? I see no ghosts except for some bearing reminders from the void for the living of our shared destiny, a kind of ars moriendi, the art of death. I find myself overcome with sadness at a man's poetry for his lost young bride. This stranger's alchemy turns his anguish into beauty as my heart cracks open for someone I don't even know. Soon, we know the soil will have her, and then the water and the air, and green grass and the trees will blow life sparks with her atoms over and over. And then perhaps, someday, another being will assemble in something like, but not quite, faith. Her pattern has been broken, and this old, mysterious, spinning globe is poorer for it. Lester DeCoster, for Faith Carver. Are these mortals resurrected by an inquisition into history? These inland graves mark many lost to a civil war. Barely a century from the nation's founding, we were divided along lines of morality, searching for our consciousness. Maine gave more sons per capita than any other state of the Union as righteousness broiled within her heart. All volunteer regiments keep reappearing with dates like June 18th, revealing a great tragedy as in Meade's failed assault of the 1st Maine Heavy Artillery, the greatest loss of life of any regiment in the entire war. Not just sons, but daughters followed their brothers, eager to serve as nurses and bring compassion to the front lines. Even these are relatively young graves, the children and grandchildren of colonists. I can follow the Sawadabscook Stream, a name bearing the hint of more ancient inhabitants, to the Penobscot River in Hamden. These coastal sites tell of our older nautical birth. Sea captains' graves appear, some lost at sea with wives who would never really know what happened. Soldiers of the revolution begin to appear, Minutemen who would assemble at a moment's notice to violently oppose those who wished to destroy these nascent communities. What role did they have before they were willing to give it all when colonists first resisted royal tyranny through economic and political subterfuge? Shadow networks replaced colonial governments and spread word of crown legislation and eventually troop movements. Settler families built rugged existences carved from the land and waged economic war through farm and craft, rejecting imported goods in a spirit of true independence and self-sufficiency. I find myself full of anger, sadness, and gratitude contemplating these unknown ancestors. We don't know each other, but they gave us an inheritance of courage. There were no guarantees, no life insurance policies, no public welfare funds. Death wasn't a reason to stop. As each generation believed through hands in daylight, their sacrifices would give the next generation a better life than their own. I feel shame at my fellow citizens for cowering in a day of confusion and disinformation, as organized efforts intentionally antagonize our differences. Divide and conquer has always been a way to defeat a nation from within. But not all forget. Some still gather to honor the sacrifice without fear. It seems public consciousness is brimming to a boil, and perhaps a new sacrifice is being made ready to water the tree of liberty once again.
I'd rather lose my job than lose my soul. Because what are you going to go tell your little boy or your little girl tonight? That you took a baton and you crushed somebody's skull? That was a mob? You got to check your nutsack when you're giving an order, and you got to say, is this a lawful order or is this a bullshit order? I want each and every one of you to do a gun check right now. This isn't a Republican thing. It's not a Democratic thing, even though Governor Newsom's making it that. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you. I don't know if that was because you got us to the street.
We are and we're only here for everybody's safety today. We plan for the worst, hope for the best, and it seems like that's what we have out here today. You are all in violation of the executive order. On that note, have a good day. Everybody be safe.
Will we honor these lost stories? Will these sacrifices be forgotten in an age where many feel for the first time less optimistic about the future than we did in the past? And I hope I can do something to help kindle the flame of the American spirit. Despite mistakes, misgivings, and failures large and small, we persist to form a more perfect union. We don't need to agree on everything, but we all yearn for peace, freedom, and prosperity. What will you give? I invite you to claim your heritage.